always felt bad whenever I asked her to like clear up my desk and file things. And she said, Dean, I love doing this stuff. What do you mean? Don't apologize. This is like just the satisfaction you get from doing it, which I hate doing all that stuff.
Yeah.
So don't worry about geeking out because we both love it. And it doesn't matter how geeky the question is.
Awesome.
It's fun.
All right, Michael, I'll play the intro. I'll do the very basic intro to the show, but then you can introduce
Hand it off to me and I can,
Yep, great. Okay.
A small Cambridge inn called the White Horse. The Reformation came.
Restless is raw, unscripted, reformed radio.
Pastor Michael, it is that time again. I am your host, Matt, and this is Restless. We are here with some unscripted, reformed raw radio. Pastor Michael, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, although, as we were just talking a little bit ago, I've had a bit of a cold that's starting to settle just at the top of my lungs. And so I'm so sorry if you have to hear a cough or anything like that. I'm going to try my best not to let that happen. But my voice might sound a little bit different because of that. Maybe like it has a little more testosterone, though. So
there's absolutely nothing better than when you continually kick off our podcast with weird health symptoms you're experiencing.
You asked how I'm doing.
I'm doing well. We are going to get to talk about AI today, and it's a really important topic. Let me explain to everyone why. AI, here's a use case for you in your everyday life. Our church had a chili cook-off this last weekend. I discussed my recipe actively with an AI large language model, and I won. So if you need to create an award-winning chili recipe like I have, I would recommend AI. So I'm so happy we're doing this today. That's right.
Chefs, it's coming for your jobs, which we'll talk about in a minute. Matt, we're not alone today, though, because as much as we like to talk about AI, we are not in any way experts in the field. But we brought on two men that I believe can be experts for us today. So we have Kyle Lee and Dean Abbott with us today. Gentlemen, welcome to the show.
Great
to be here.
Do you guys want to go ahead and just introduce yourselves briefly so that everybody can kind of get to know who you are and maybe something about why we would have reached out to have you join us today to talk about AI?
Yeah, I'm Dean Abbott. I'm a ruling elder at New Life Presbyterian Church of La Mesa, which is just east of San Diego. I've been in the AI machine learning space for my entire career since 1986. So I've seen a lot. The big difference now is people care. Back then, nobody cared. It's just something that some geek did in the back office, and there are all these research projects that you might do with the DoD or something. But now everybody knows about it. And I've been building predictive models and doing AI in public sector with DoD, Department of Treasury, private sector with companies, with Los Angeles Times, other large newspapers, Alaska Airlines. You can go to my website, abbotanalytics.com, to see the breadth of it. But I teach a lot. I've written books on analytics. So I just love this space. I'm one of those kind of geeks.
Let's see. So I'm Kyle Lee. I'm a member over at Christ Presbyterian Church in Burke, Virginia. I've been a member of Nate Park churches around the KAPC, the URC, and now back in the PCA. I'm a senior data scientist at a company called Elder Research, where Dean actually started there many decades ago.
Mm-hmm. I was employee number one at Elder Research.
You were employee number one. And I remember when I first met Dean, it was like about 10 years ago. We met at a missions conference. And we just realized we were both data scientists, and I became his intern, and now we're here 10 years later. What other things do I do? Recently, I've been playing around with I've been trying to build out an application for the PCA called Clerk GPT, which is like a tool to try to essentially it's a research tool to look through all the PCA documents that's available in the PCA history website. And just using a lot of the modern tools that we have now that Dean was mentioning, like it's an exciting space. There's a lot to learn. I mean, like there's no way to catch up with every single publication or something like that like if someone ever tells me like they know everything about AI, I get skeptical.
Yeah.
But that's a little bit about me.
Awesome. Hey, we appreciate you guys joining us because this seems to be one of those areas that is moving so fast and so many new things are happening all the time. And you hear things that sound outlandish and some people think, oh, it'll all blow over. This won't mean anything or do anything. And so it's just one of those topics that I feel like comes up in so many different ways. And so I'm sure there's a million different ways that we could jump into it. But one of the reasons that we felt a little bit of a push to have you guys on was this article that went around on X. It's now up to 85 million, at least, views, called Something Big is Happening, where I don't even know, right? Some AI guy talked about how this is moving so fast, it's going to change the entire world and everybody's jobs are up for grabs, at least white collar jobs. And so there's just all these questions that I think a lot of people have about these things. And so I think maybe a good place to start, given that this is a topic that you guys think about, know about, work in, what are some of the things that you feel like Christians really need to know about AI? What should we be aware of?
First, let me start that, and I'll let you jump into here, Kyle. But this discussion about AI that we have now is not new. One of the things when I teach courses on machine learning and AI, one of the things I put up, one of the slides I put up is quotes about AI hype through the decades. And back to the 50s, talking about how AI is going to take over the human race in the 50s, you know, back then. And so all the stuff we're seeing now, it's a little bit different the way AI is being made manifest. But there's always been that thread where there's some people, and I really think there's part of the spiritual warfare that's going on here, is that there are researchers and scientists who want so much for there to be autonomy outside the presence of God that they talk about what used to be called hard AI. And now we're talking about AGI or just artificial general intelligence. The thought that this is the next step in the evolutionary process, you know, and soon, maybe it's always like in the next 10 years or next 15 years, we're finally going to get to the point where these machines are going to surpass what humans can do. So I think as Christians, that's one of the things, that's part of where the battleground is being formed. I'll hand it over to you, Kyle, too, if there's things you're seeing along those lines too.
Like I've had similar thoughts thinking through, because I've been noticing how Christians in general have been treating AI, and you know, they don't have a technical background, and that's totally fine. But the over reliance of a tool, and it becomes an idol, right? At the end of the day, AI has no soul.
Right.
It's not made in the image of God, right? And so I think we as Christians already have a lot of resources to combat this in a way from a spiritual warfare standpoint. Because at the end of the day, like when I program with LLMs and I deploy applications related to LLMs, at the end of the day, it is a sophisticated pattern matcher. You have a set of words that you have already typed in, and then it predicts the next word based on those words. And there's like 8 billion parameters in these models, right? And so there's no internal understanding. There's no internal comprehension. It seems very black box. It looks like a magic trick, right? We often think about it like, whoa, it's responding back to me, like as if I'm God, right? But we have to push away from the dystopian or utopian perspective, in my view, because it can't. It's like a magic trick, right? Like you're in awe of the magic trick until you realize how it works, or the magician just starts stealing your $50 from the magic trick. Then you realize you're under threat, right?
Right.
But that the fact that AI doesn't have a soul, what that also means is it could produce a defense of the resurrection by the way you interact it, but it could also try to oppose your defense if a non-believer were to use that tool and argue it. There's no sense of truth. There's no commitment to the truth. Only what's plausible.
And along those lines, Kyle, one of the things that's important to understand is these LLMs are programmed to be affirming. And so they're going to try to agree with you. And you can ask it to be more contrarian, and they will be a little bit more contrarian, but they're still going to affirm you. I mean, when I interact with LLMs now, ChatGPT knows I'm reformed. It knows I'm a believer, and I don't have to tell it anymore. From a reform perspective, what about this topic? It already knows that, which is handy from my perspective. But then think of a non-believer who is pushing back against Christianity. That's all it's going to get, that positive feedback, internal loop that is going to give the illusion of objectivity without there being true objectivity.
Yes. Oh, man. So it's so good. We're having, you guys have already spurred some very,
I know. I love this.
As someone who uses it and has heard people around me many times say it was so good when ChatGPT affirmed me, as I've heard that. I want to take one step back because I do think for most people, even people who've used ChatGPT, watched the Super Bowl because they weren't hardcore Sabbatarians, and then logged into ChatGPT or Claude and started using them, I do think most people's interaction with them is this is a magic black box that spits out, I'm impressed with what it spits out to me, or how does it guess that? And so I do want you guys, because even when we use the term LLM, I don't think that's as common as when people hear AI. So I want you to tell me just a very brief definition for people what that is, and then I want you to describe a little bit about kind of what it's for, because again, people hear all kinds of things, right? AI is the thing creating videos that have ruined Facebook, which is why it's all animals talking. AI is a thing apparently they use to go into Venezuela, the defense, and the Delta Force is using it, right? We just learned we're going to soon have an AI clerk in the PCA, right? Where the use cases, and so I just think a lot of these things are baffling for people when they hear like, okay, it makes videos and that ruined Facebook Reels for me. Oh, the military uses it. I use it to get a recipe and I'm told it's a great idea and then it's terrible, except my recipe. My chili was great. So if you guys would just explain a little bit about an LLM for people, which is what, where we are, what most people's experience of AI is, and a little bit about, how it's used, what it's for. So.
Well, LLM, large language models, and at the core of an LLM is a technology that you may have heard because it started entering the popular space like on Star Trek or things like this, called neural networks. And neural networks were the original, let's emulate the brain kind of technology. And so a lot of what we're seeing now with the hype around AI, I joke, it feels so early 90s to me when neural networks were really gaining momentum and people were talking about all these great things they're doing. But the neural networks just became more and more complex because cognition and the ability to do exactly what Kyle described before, take any topic you come up with and say, okay, what is a good response to this? A chili recipe. So these LLMs consume just incredible amounts of information, of data. like scraping the web, whether it's Wikipedia or just everywhere in the web, or custom like audio, video, all these kinds of sources of data, that you could imagine having just a ginormous file cabinet of information. But then the trick is the large language models, then when you prompt it with something, it says, oh, that's kind of like this. And like Kyle was saying, it's predicting how to respond to it, like one phrase or one word at a time, to piece together a narrative of what that answer is. So it's probabilistic, it's predictive. It's not like a Google search. Like people, a lot of times they think that it's just a better Google search. It's not, because it's not looking up a specific thing. It's like if you went to Google, Matt, and asked for a recipe, it would pull up some examples of recipes. That's not what these LLMs are doing. They're saying, oh, chili recipes. There's all this information about what these recipes could look like. What would be a good combination based upon all these other recipes that I've seen in the past? How can I combine this information together into a new idea? I'm going to pause, Kyle, because I know Kyle teaches about LLMs also. So I want to hear what you have to say about this.
LLMs get even more powerful when you combine them with something called tools. And so that just means a function to look up the internet and things like that. Like if you play with Claude Code or Chat GPT, it says BRB, searching the internet, right? It's providing that context back to the LLM from actual stuff written, somewhere in the web. And then all of that context helps it formulate its response. So, because back then when we were dealing with GPT, 3.0, what was happening is LLMs would kind of make stuff up like, hey, what's the weather? It'll tell you it's 70 degrees, but it doesn't even know where you're from.
Right. And there's a name for that.
Making stuff up, right? Hallucinations.
Which is so funny that's what it's used, because it's not like a lie. It's not like just got it wrong. It's hallucinating. It's like it's on drugs or something,
Yeah, and so it's combining, LLMs with tools, so like web search or looking up a database or things like that. It's providing that context into the LLM for it to make even a more convincing answer than it had before. A good LLM would be like, I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to that question. And there are mechanisms to teach the LLM how to do that when it's not confident enough. That's where a lot of the PhD research is at. So it's being able to restrain itself from an ethical standpoint and whatnot. But again, it doesn't get it right all the time. This is why, Claude or one of the other companies, hired their chief AI safety officer or something like that. Because if you keep prompting in a particular way, it's going to start, leaving the bounds of safety it was originally trained on, because people are trying to get clever with it to make it come up with a response. But a lot of the functionality that you see saying it's looking up the web for these articles, it's really just it's just throwing back all that context back into the LLM to be able to do something with it, rather than looking at its own internal training. So it's now improved upon that. When you give it hands, it's going to do a lot more. Yeah.
And now it can rent a human, right? So I actually think, Kyle, when you described this, like when I hear Christians talk about AI, it probably maps how most people talk about it, right? So some people go, I tried it, it doesn't work very well. I hear the even what you were kind of describing as idolatry, right? The overuse of a tool, or I think the confirmation bias machine kind of set up how it works seems to be another. And then of course there are the people who are like, we can't touch this. This is dystopian. This is the demon religion. This is literal sorcery. And so I think that this is where people are thinking. And so when Michael mentioned there's this kind of big thing coming, that again, it's everyone is feeling some kind of a sense of there's something big coming, which this article probably, as I've thought about it longer, probably just spat out by a large language model and posted by a guy for the sake of engagement. is this is what people feel. And so when you guys think about, when you hear either, you can respond directly to the article, which we'll post in the show notes for people, about the effects AI will have on the workplace and other things. Where are you guys at? What do you think some of these implications are? Are they just way too out there, or are they yeah, what? I'll let you go. I don't know exactly how to ask. So
Yeah.
I'll say there's one way I'm not worried at all about these LLMs. Another way I am very concerned about where that's going to take our society. So where I'm not concerned is that these, as Kyle was saying, these LLMs and these models, they don't have souls. They don't have true cognition. They don't understand what they're really responding to. Like there's no sentience. So I think some of the hype about all the jobs they're going to take, I'm not so concerned about that, because they can go so far. In fact, the kinds of jobs they'll take, it's like I'll do a coding example. And Kyle, I'm curious if you agree with this, but if you're the type of coder who is using like React or Agile or something, doing something like web programming, and you learned it at a boot camp over a long weekend, and now you're getting jobs, those kind of jobs will probably go away, because that's the kind of thing that that the code generation capability of Gen AI really can do. Is that a bad thing? I don't know. Some people entry level will not be able to get those jobs, but that's to me not the big chunk of the workforce. Where I am concerned is, I don't know if you recall, like Malcolm Gladwell, I think it was in his book Blink, he talked about the 10,000 repetitions to become an expert in something. And where I am concerned is if people rely too much on AI for whether it's coding or writing sermons or doing things like that, you're missing the opportunity to do the 10,000 repetitions of seemingly boring stuff over and over again to develop that muscle memory. I remember reading in a book once, the book was called The Brain That Changes Itself, about like when you're learning to play the piano, your brain just starts going crazy. It builds all these neuronic connections and it just expands. But then after a while, as you develop what we would call muscle memory, it shrinks, which is why when you're walking down the street, you're not going crazy thinking about where your next step is going to be, because your body just makes that super compact and concise. So you don't have to think about those things. When you're playing the piano, it's muscle memory. And that's why people who are even starting to lose it mentally still can play the piano, because they develop all these connections that are super efficient. If we use AI to do those kinds of basic tasks, we miss the opportunity to develop like the boring stuff, doing it over and over again, develop that kind of muscle memory. I'm more concerned about that and losing like the mid and upper tier of capabilities, or having pastors not wrestle with the texts for a long time, and they just automatically just pull out something from ChatGPT because they can do it in a half an hour rather than spending 6, 8, 10 hours wrestling with the text.
That's fast. It's like a GLP-1 for your brain, right? Or like for the things you do, right? Like, hey, you don't need any of the discipline to lose weight, to stop, right? You don't have to do any of the habit building that makes you into the kind of person that can do this. You just take this pill, or you just type into this LLM, and it just, boom, you get it.
Yes.
Yeah, I think maybe the jury's still out on the actual impacts. Obviously, we're the folks that feel most threatened are those that are like lawyers, doctors, right? Programmers. I think it's because it's the first time we've seen where we see a sense of cognitive automation. that's going on, kind of like, how we think about those in the meatpacking industry, right? And then machines start coming in to replace their jobs, right? I think there's going to be a sense of displacement, but every technology has always displaced folks and created new jobs. And so I think I'm more concerned about the speed of how this is all tracking. But I think when it comes to with other kinds of tasks, especially like the ministerial role, the prophetic office of the pastor, right? Like that can't be replaced, right?
Right.
And AI is not going to sit at someone's deathbed, right? I mean, that'd be so depressing.
Well, just you wait. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but I'm worried that might happen.
Yep.
I'm not saying.
Well, that's
good.
where, don't you think context is so important with these being very specific, and it's very difficult to have this general purpose model provide very specific context unless you prompt in just the right way. And I'm curious, I'm looking at you, Matt, without you knowing it, about with the way you've interacted with it. How much supervision do you need to provide those prompts to get what you really want out of it?
Yeah, this is a good question. Let me describe what you mean, just in case someone doesn't understand. There's this, and I don't know, maybe this is all just end user thing, because when I interact with AI, the most useful things I find online are things that people call prompt engineering. And it's the way you get a large language model to do really, in my mind, interesting things is you have to give it a series of, the more specific your instructions are, the more improved responses you'll get. So if you ask it, tell me about William Perkins, the Puritan writer, you're going to get AI slop, and it's not useful. But if you want William Perkins only answer using volume 5 and everything he says about, right, the first petition of the Lord's Prayer in volume 5, you can start, like, I'm just saying that the more specification you give it, the more interesting things you get it. And so when I use AI, if I use it for research, let's say I use it for research in a sermon, I get really specific about the kinds of questions I want. Or if I really hate grammar editing, so if I ask it to edit grammar, but I have to give it so many specifications: do not change my wording, do not change content, do not change length, and I have to kind of go down. But I will ask it things like, how many illustrations did I use and where do they fall, to just see, like, where did I put things in this? And so I do think learning this kind of learning the right, and I will actually use AI to ask me to get better prompts. Ask me 5 questions to help me clarify what I'm trying to say, or what I'm trying to ask this, or what I'm trying to learn. And so then I'll get a better answer. And so I do that quite a bit. I don't know if that's interesting to anyone else, but that is what I end up doing. Yeah.
No,
Well,
but I think
experience
that's a
too.
measure. That's a measure of how well you know your job, right? Because, like, I remember taking an algorithms class in my computer science days, and one of the first exercises the professor would have is, how do you make a peanut butter jelly sandwich? Right? Precisely, how do you go about that?
Yeah,
You
yeah,
pick
all
up the knife. What do you do with that? Right? You're understanding the exact tasking that needs to be done. I don't know. Maybe Dean had a similar.
And I really like in
Yeah.
both ChatGPT, I'm sure Gemini has it, but they have where you can do projects, and I can upload documents, and as like, even more, use this as the context of what I'm talking about. Right.
Yeah.
And so I like that as well.
And I do that. I've used Notebook LM, Google's thing to actually, I was really interested at creating podcasts for me based upon my content. And I upload a bunch of content. But here's something that's interesting, just when we're talking about limitations, and I know we'll get more to the limitations of what the technology can and can't do. But I uploaded a bunch of my PowerPoints, and then I asked it to summarize it. And it said something, and I won't bore you with the specific technical thing that it said, but it was I got into an argument with it over what I wrote or what I was teaching. Now, I didn't say that this is my content initially. I just uploaded it.
Sure.
And there was this question about how to sample for building stable models. And it said what it thought I said, and it was wrong. And I said, no, I think Dean says this. And then finally I'd say, no, this is Dean.
Yeah.
And I know what I said.
Yeah.
And here's where it missed. It's because things that from a language standpoint that are very difficult to understand well is negation. So if you say, this is what I was writing is, this is what the industry says, but I disagree, and this is what I think you should do. So it picked up on the first one. Sarcasm is also very difficult for these language models to pick up very reliably. And so that's why the question was to you about how you have to refine it. Yeah, being very specific. And just like with any, I don't want to make these like people, but with any person, sometimes you have to refine the way you ask a question to make sure you're understood, because you don't understand necessarily all the assumptions you're making about your thinking when you're communicating this. And it's really helpful from that standpoint to try to expose, oh yeah, I'm assuming this set of criteria that, and then when you're writing your sermon, that may help you unravel that a little bit to make your sermon more clear.
I mean, it's a little bit, right? It's a fancier version. So Simeon's Trust is one of the things I consider to be the best practical preaching helps that exists. Great program. And they have a worksheet where it's like, work through these steps to create your sermon outline. And they're like, and you're doing this for the sake of practice, right? You don't have to do this every time, but you need to work through from why did you choose these resources down to exegetical outline, to an outline you'll preach, to what applications you'll make. And I'm like, this is on paper, like this is on, and people look at me so strangely. I'm like, that's what research, like using AI for clarity and research, it's just doing that. It's prompting you. You can make it just prompt you with these questions. Kyle, but you both mentioned this, and I think I want to ask about the jobs, because they're going to take our jobs is an important question everyone has. Kyle, when you mentioned this is the first cognitive automation, I think that is that's such a helpful way to think about it. So I do want to I want to go back before we keep going, because there's so many ways we could go, but this idea of we're going to lose jobs, people are going, there will be jobs created. Just talk a little bit more about that, because you can talk about, because every time I hear someone say, well, I tried AI, it won't work, it's not going to be a white collar job. Whenever I hear someone say that, I'm like, well, there's some young guy who's going to figure this out and have a lot of room for advancement if he decides to use this tool in whatever field. But both of you were more, which is good. You guys are in the PCA. You're both more moderate about your predictions on its effect on the job market, even in our very white collar, right, computer-based jobs that we have so many of.
Yeah, I have no fear of losing my job, since I'm the one building the freaking thing. I think when it comes to like what's going to happen again, I still think it's just too early on. Just like with every hype cycle, a couple of years ago it was blockchain. The years before that, I mean, I don't know what the hype was, Dean, back like 10 years ago, but folks were thinking a lot about the precursor to LLMs in the tech space.
Even like the internet, right? Like when I think back about like with the popularization of the internet across the world, there was this sense that, everything is now going to change. And in some sense it did. And also everybody's still here. And in some, like, there's so many things that were created that weren't here. Is it like, do you see it as kind of like that, or will it have a more damaging effect?
I'd vote for more damaging than that.
I lean that, like, again, I'm trying to resist the utopian vision that tech bros have, and then the totally dystopian view that maybe a Dutch farm in the middle of Kansas
Right.
is thinks about when their child comes to them saying, "Look, AI," right? Because so there was an essay written a couple of years ago that I think about a lot because I think it indicates a lot of the content that's being produced as a result of AI. The famous adage that's like we're drowning in a sea of information and thirsting for wisdom, right?
Yep.
This essay, it's called On BS by Harry Frankfurt. One of the things he says, he has this great quote. Do you know what the difference between BS and what was it? Someone who BS's and someone who lies. At least the liar has a conviction of what the truth is. A
Interesting.
BSer has no conviction of the truth whatsoever.
Yeah.
And then that's like what we think about. Matt, you already coined the term. Like we've been saying of AI slop, right?
Yeah.
Right.
The barriers to entry to content creation is now near to zero. Anyone can ask a prompt saying, "Hey, come up with my script," or "come up with my content," or even have an autonomous agent like OpenClaw or something like that to do all the work on a computer, and then you wake up in the morning with everything done for you. Like, it kind of scares me, especially how formative it is on children. Like I was at the gym a couple of weeks ago in the locker, and then all of a sudden I heard this 10-year-old sing, the "We Are Charlie Kirk" song, and that's AI generated. And I was terrified how a 10-year-old is just singing that constantly just to fill in the awkward silence of the locker room, right?
Oh, yeah.
I'm a little pessimistic, but I don't want to be too dystopian or too utopian about this.
I will say,
I think I want to learn how the technology works, treat it as a tool, and use it wisely, right?
I think that's such a good way to think about too. Like when you think about a tool, any tool, right? That is it is usually some kind of like multiplier of something, right? It multiplies force. You think about a hammer, right? It multiplies force to a particular point. But ultimately it comes down to, well, who's swinging the hammer? Where are they swinging it, right? All of it comes down to context. It comes down to the image bearer of God that's involved with that tool. One of the things I'd be interested to hear your thoughts about when we talk about the jobs that this might be coming for. There's no doubt, but I think you'd be hard pressed to say, yeah, this isn't going to have much of an effect. Obviously, it's going to be big in some way. It might not be the full dystopian, everybody's going to be a farmer now, although there could be benefits as somebody with a small farm. But
I sense a Wendell Berry vision going on here.
I love the berry. So, but there is a sense of this is how I think of it. And I want to hear your thoughts. Maybe I'm totally off base. There are so many jobs right now in the modern economy that are fake, right? There are these middleman positions where somebody's doing something that it really doesn't matter, but you have to have somebody that fills that place, that void, that these tools can easily fit in, easily replace, and do far better. And in my opinion, that's good. It's going to be hard, right? It will be hard if you have a position like that. If you have been in the same position your whole life and all of a sudden this comes to disrupt it, I'm not denying the difficulty, the pain of that. Anytime you're searching for a new job, right? Like there's hardship involved, but there are things to do out there, right? I happen to know in almost every single place, there's a massive shortage of plumbers, of electricians, of a lot of other things that need doing. And so we know that there's, opportunity, at least in some regard, if you're willing to do it. But it seems to me like the main use case of so many of these AI tools is middleman positions of people that aren't doing that much of value anyway. And maybe that sounds mean, but what are your thoughts about that?
Just so everyone knows, middleman, workers in suburbia, my neighbors, I love you. You know, we.
I love you too. I want
for
you to do something
But-
more fulfilling.
But after this, Pastor Michael, after this episode, if I have time, we'll do a conspiracy corner that will go on our Patreon feed, and I will ask Kyle and Dean a question of a conspiracy that none of those jobs will go anywhere, even if LLMs literally are doing all of those things. So I just don't know why actually
Oh, I love
This is a
that.
great point.
job
This
will
is already a
be
great point.
disappeared. But yeah, what do you guys think about his question there?
I do think that there are jobs that will go away like that that don't require a lot of creative energy. There are more what I would sometimes I refer to these as recipe driven jobs. Like you do if A, B, and C are true, then you do this, and you're just in there to manage that process. Here's my worry about that. Because obviously the physical tasks are going to remain, and that's something that AI can't do because AI lives in not only a digital world, but a two-dimensional representation of the digital world. Because data, think about all the data it consumes is like you describe as loadable in a spreadsheet. That's the way it lives, which is not the way humans interact with the world. You know, we interact in 3 dimensions, or if you include time, in 4 dimensions. But here's my concern. There are people who can provide great value to society or to the church or to your family, who are essentially doing these kind of what we consider in some ways mundane jobs. But that's exactly a great place for them to be because they're being productive. They're happy doing it. It doesn't require something that, and I don't mean this as an IQ argument per se, but there's certainly that component to it. And to find ways that people can be productive in using gifts God has given them, whatever those gifts are, in a helpful way, that's part of what I'm concerned about. The more we automate away kind of what we call mundane tasks, how can we help everybody in our community do something that's productive and valuable for society and for the church?
I should maybe, if I even clarify more, even what I'm saying, I actually think what you're getting to is really important and really good. I would clarify to say, my point is those positions in the kind of dead multinational corporate setting where all of your work is not going to your community, not going to your family, that like coming out of that, and then for instance, finding a position in a smaller business or a community of some kind where like maybe you are best suited for those sorts of things. That to me is ideal. Like that to me is, yes, let's do that. I also know you disrupt the one and there might not be another to go to, and that is the danger. So it's a good clarifying point.
Michael, you're doing a yay, nay, or nuance. Let's get rid of the S&P 500 companies and just see what happens. Yeah. What do you think, Kyle, about the jobs affected, or the kinds of roles that are jeopardized that way?
I'm like slightly hesitant to say that, we're replacing all these jobs immediately with AI agents right now, because there's always been a discussion lately of like, what's the return on investment? Is it much more of a hassle to set these up architecturally in a company? And I think a lot of companies are finding themselves to be in a weird position where they're not getting the payoff that they had initially envisioned. Because there's only certain things that you cannot replace, especially for like jobs that require such a real experience, like a doctor. Like, sure, an LLM may have access to so many different things in terms of like all the textbooks required for medical knowledge and whatnot, but only the doctor can interact with the patient and know what to do with their patient's history, and maybe identify a particular cause that an LLM can't figure out. Positions like that require those kinds of degrees, like even my field, like if you have a bunch of AI agents, so we call this, like you have an orchestrator agent, and then you have a bunch of sub agents working to isolate these small tasks, trying to get together to develop a code base. It's kind of terrifying, but at the same time, is it something that shows the mastery of someone in the space? Because those are some of those things you can't really replace with. If you have a senior, software engineer that looks at it, it's like, no, this is poorly designed. Yeah, it works. It's not optimal. I think we're in a period right now where we always talk about min-maxing, right? We're min-maxing results, we're min-maxing ROI, right?
Yep.
And we're not getting the full, promise that at least, the tech bros would promise to us of like this, it's going to replace so many things. I don't think it's happening, at least not yet. And if it does, I think local economies are going to naturally adapt just as we've always adapted. And I think there will be some displacement, like what Dean was saying.
I think
not everything has to be automated.
Yeah. I think your answer, though, is so telling, because even in the article Michael mentioned, but in a lot of these other spaces, they say, why do you think they trained AI on coding first? So we can get rid of everyone writing AI, so it will just write itself, right? And what you just said is, my job's pretty safe working on writing it. And so I think that's really telling that even in the place where there has been the most bravado and like we're getting rid of everybody, the OpenClaw agents, they've got it from here. They're gonna write all of this. I think that's really telling, because even with a doctor where there are having had a child in a NICU and having learned how to ask it very specific questions about readings I'm seeing and things I'm getting, and getting very detailed answers back to me, more detailed than I could get in other settings. It's such a high liability situation. You need a human. Yep. Like there are these you can't change it. So there's a way
to sue an agent.
Yeah, exactly.
But humans are different. Humans are able to do things that these LMs cannot do. Humans are excellent at analogical reasoning. And so you could be walking out in the fields and seeing bees buzzing around flowers, and it could prompt you to thinking, that's a lot like this parable. And you're making that connection in a way that the LLM can't, unless there's a document somewhere in its corpus that has made that connection. It won't make that connection. And so that's why, like within your NICU experience, Matt, I mean, an AI agent could tell you on average, or in many situations, what to expect. But there are things that it does not know about your context, that only that doctor making those connections, or sometimes the parent seeing things with that newborn that are not yet explained to the doctor or to the LLM, that it's essential to make the right diagnosis or take the next step.
I have 3 huge areas of questions, but a way I've been trying to help people understand what AI can't do and what it can do is, and I've been trying to use kind of an illustration. So, and I think this podcast, I'm going to use it for the sake of this illustration. So in theory, a person, instead of listening to this podcast for an hour or however long this ends up being, they could go ask ChatGPT or whatever large language model they like a series of questions, that maybe the exact questions I asked you, and they could get the information in a condensed way. They could get, all this information. And so the question is, as we're talking, and this is kind of what you were getting at, Dean, what can't it do in terms of the conversation we're all having? And why wouldn't someone just, other than that they love Restless, why wouldn't someone just ask ChatGPT? Because I have a way I've been trying to answer it, but I realized it's when I start to answer it, it starts to feel above my pay grade as I try and explain it to someone. And so I don't want to be goofy when I do it. But how would you guys answer that question?
Do you want to jump in first, Kyle?
Dean, go first. I have a feeling I know what you're going to say.
Okay.
Well, one thing is, one of my critiques about the limitations of the LLMs is they're all trained on essentially, I mean, there's differences, but essentially the same kind of information using the same kind of algorithms, the same kind of error metrics. And an error metric, what I mean by that is when you're trying to predict what's the next word or phrase that you should add to this response, it's got to look through it's, and this is what the model is doing internally, trying to trade off everything that it's seen in the past with what it's built so far and predict what's the most likely best thing. Now, best is optimization. Kyle's used optimal in his description of the past, and mathematically, we think there is a best answer, and there's a bunch of other answers which are okay, but not as good as the answer. Now, when we're asking you a question, Matt or Michael, you're thinking when you're responding, you're coming up with what you think is the best answer to this question. And so you give your answer, and that's your perspective. Now you're using in some ways, a limited set of information, and these LLMs have this huge corpus of information, but it's still making that trade-off and saying this is the best answer so far. The thing that people will get from this podcast that they won't get from ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini is different perspectives as we trade off the information in different ways. And maybe what we come up with is resonating with you in a way that, like maybe what Kyle is saying is resonating with you in a way that it's not. When I say it, it doesn't resonate because he's using different words. He's giving different analogies, those kinds of things. And so these LLMs are so limited in that standpoint. They have kind of one way of thinking. And they're also limited because the information that they use is very limited. We as humans use so much more information. We have sensory inputs. We've got 5 senses, and we think 3-dimensionally. We hear, we see, there's depth perception with what we see in a way that these LLMs can't do because they get everything. It's just digital, it's just numbers in a spreadsheet that they ingest. And so it's automatically limited and constrained and really hamstrung and how good they can get. So I don't know if that's helpful. And Kyle, maybe that's prompting you to do something that's more clear.
No, because I think what we're getting at is us having this conversation is an expression of playing out what it means to be made in the image of God, right? We all have rationality. We all have a sense of moral agency. We all have different experiences. Like, I don't know what it feels like to be up in Wisconsin and how the world looks like to you compared to me being in the suburbs of Virginia and looking at DC politics, or Dean being in San Diego enjoying the nice sun, right?
Yep.
We all have a sense of understanding and accountability, right? And this is what makes it interesting, right? Otherwise, I think it depends on how you view the world, right? You either view it in a sort of Cartesian framework where, like, pretty much we're all brains on a stick, right? If I just need to download the information, that's all I want, and that's how I'm going to view all of humanity and whatnot. There are some things that can't account for. You can't account for love. You can't account for relationships, right? What scares me right now is folks looking at AI as a sort of spiritual companion. It's like, oh, it's gotten to know me. We've been using a lot of anthropomorphic language, right?
Yep.
And it's terrifying about how there's apps being built and to make that spiritual companion, right? But that does not have the image of God, and so I think.
But that's where it's deceptive because it's the illusion, and this is, I think, where we're going with the danger of AI. It has the illusion of being human or interacting. So some people will use them as friends, and that they'll discuss things with, and they'll be affirming, and more affirmation than they ever get from people in my church, that kind of thing. Yeah. And it's that's dangerous, which says a lot about how we need to respond and interact with each other, with our brothers and sisters in Christ, in a way that is speaking the truth in love. So yes, we need to be affirming in some ways, but we also need to be clear and biblical in the way we think and respond. And these LLMs, they're not. There's a quote from Roger Penrose, who is the Penrose-Hawking theorem, like the Big Bang. And whatever you think of the Big Bang, he's a super smart guy, and he is very anti-hard AI. And he said, consciousness is not a computational property of the brain. And so the way God has made us cannot be reduced to a set of equations. And that's what AI tries to do. It's trying to emulate it. So it can approximate in some crude way, but it's nowhere close to how God has actually made us.
Yeah, I think that's so good. All right, so let's ask a practical use question that I hope starts to get at like these limitations and these concerns. So let's use a topic that would be really more likely interesting to our listeners. So theological study. All right, this person wants they're in seminary, or they're a guy. I want to read more. I want to learn more theology. What would you imagine him using for AI? And even with some of these mundane things, what would you be like, wait, don't ever, don't start trying to do this through. What advice would you give basically to me, as you,
that is why we're doing this. It's because Matt and I wanted the help.
Yeah.
Well, I'll say this, that I think until you know a subject well, it's better to wrestle through the initial discovery yourself.
Really
and so that's my recommendation with whatever the topic is. So if you're going through a particular scriptural passage, I would think that the first thing you want to do anyway is to read it yourself and meditate on this over, maybe days, before you even start going to commentaries, which is one way you can get assistance and see things the way other people may have thought about it. And then
can I jump in there and just
AI.
say, I've maybe mentioned this. I don't know if I've mentioned this on the pod, maybe for patrons. But at one point, I have several writing projects that I'm working on through the Gospel of John in different ways. And maybe, this is maybe a year ago. So it was, it was much older models than there are now. But I was using a paid version of Grok, and I just wanted it to just categorize for me. I could go through the whole gospel and find this, but I was like, hey, could you just lay out for me every time in the ESV that water is mentioned in the Gospel of John? Now I'm coming into this having, listened to, read the Gospel of John hundreds and hundreds of times over the course of the, previous couple of years, spent hours upon hours upon hours every week studying it. And so I'm going into it with that already. And I was just like, hey, this would be great to just quick get this for me. I can put it into a document and then begin to work from it. But I noticed instantly that like the second reference to water in the Gospel of John was missing on the list that it gave me. Oh. And so it had a lot of them, but because I knew the material, I knew right away, wait a minute, there's one of these is missing. You missed this. And it was like, oh yes, you're correct. And I'm like, well, now I can't trust any of it.
Good catch, Pastor Michael.
I might as well go and just do it myself now. If you're going to miss things that simple, especially.
Pastor Michael coming in with it doesn't work take. That was the worst.
I said it was an old model. It
was the worst version we're ever going to use.
This is why it's so important to think about LLMs as it's a pattern matcher. It's a very good pattern matcher. There's no internal knowledge. Like when I count, it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. LLMs have no internal sense of that. They may make associations on certain words with next to each other. And that's why I have a sort of I think maybe more of a kind of trust, but always verify. Always have an LLM explain to you the reasoning behind everything it does, or point you to the actual sources. And look at those sources yourself, and then you make your judgment. We don't want to outsource our thinking to LLMs.
And that's one way that what you're describing, Michael, is really helpful, because if you go through and look at all the examples of water, it's more than just counting or listing out all those examples.
Yeah.
You're seeing context around it, which is you're kind of storing. I'm thinking like when Paul's in the synagogues and talking to, and preaching to the Jewish leaders, because they had such a deep understanding of the scriptures, what he said was like color versus black and white or something. It meant so much more, so much richer than if he just spewed out some concepts and they say, oh, okay, I can ride with that.
Yeah, that's really good.
I think that's such a good example, Michael, because the thing I try and think about it in terms of what am I going to speed up and what do I want to slow down and actually not use it for. So for example, now I need to improve it. For example, my Hebrew knowledge is relatively rudimentary. So I've used Logos and other tools like that. Well, I can actually speed up all the questions and the way I was using Hebrew pretty quickly with a large language model. Working through it, help me identify grammar patterns I'm actually not very good at noticing right away. And I can get it to help me work through that pretty fast. But for example, I want everyone to instead now, we'll use the example of one of these Puritans again, right? William Perkins or someone, or John Owen, you should actually just go sit down and start trying to read their collected works a few pages a day. Slow it down, right? Completely, do that. I don't want, a manuscript I'm only going to be referencing while I speak. My exact grammar edits don't matter to me because I'm not reading it anyway, word for word. So give me a clean grammar version of this. But I don't want, I have set up prompts where it's do not write for me, do not provide an answer, do not these high limitations so that because writing is thinking, right? This is one of the concerns I have with people overly relying on this is now, no, I don't want to send emails back to healthcare.gov where I have to buy my insurance from, where they're asking me inane questions and I can say, write an answer with this information. You're like, we already know,
Right.
I get that, but like writing is still thinking. And so I'm always thinking about like the speed up, slow down. And I'm probably too much of a productivity hack type person. And so that's my own, my own problem, my own, very kind of Spartan limited mindset. I'm not an artisan. I'm not Wendell Berry living off the land in these beautiful ways, but I just want to make the best chili. So I'm willing to do what it takes. Michael,
By the way, okay, new idea. We should do this.
Okay.
We should have an AI chili cook-off.
Oh man.
Every AI give us the best chili recipe. You make all of them. Which one is actually better?
Mine will be, because this was so good.
See, then you've got to do the chili in the style of Julia Child, or chili in the style of
that's how I made it better, is I gave it constraints. I have a child with a kind of a beef allergy, so no beef, none of these ingredients, right? It needs to win in the Midwest, so it can't be too spicy, and you have to have beans in it, otherwise they'll reject it, right? So constraints were the key. When Michael mentioned, Michael, you can ask another question after this, but this is just another pure, these guys will give me an interesting answer. So we know that everyone knows who watched the Super Bowl, there are competitors in the AI space. My wife talks about my friend Claude, right? She knows that I use Claude. She probably uses ChatGPT. Obviously, Google has a huge, with a huge context. Michael mentioned Grok. And you both kind of indicated all of these models are kind of consolidating on the same kind of algorithm. They all, maybe they're trained a little differently, but they all seem basically trained in a similar way. what is what going to set? I mean, is the training data the same? Because I was thinking, what's actually going to set these things competitors apart over time? Is it the data they're trained on? What's gonna make winners or losers in this space? And for people who want to use it, right? What are they thinking about? Is it just, well, I asked a lot of questions to this one already, so it's already convenient?
For a long time, the game has been about more data, more computational power. That's the direction that the large players in the space are going. And just as one side thing, the whole interface, the chat interface, was really just, Kyle, you probably know this better than I do, but it was just a developmental nicety because the real core was the LLM under the surface, right. But interacting was just put there to help debug it and stuff like that. And it turned out to be, that was the commercial interest. That was the real innovation. But the naysayers, those who are more skeptical about what these LLMs can do now, really emphasize things like causal inference, different kinds of frameworks that we need mathematically in order for generative AI to become more truly AGI. Artificial general intelligence, to do a broader, because there's a lot of things that these LLMs struggle with now that are not novel. I mean, we've known about them for a long time, but we're not going to overcome it just with more computational power. So I do think we're going to need a paradigm shift in how they're built to see the next generation. What I'm hoping, I'm not seeing a lot of it, but I'm hoping that's really where the industry is going to go next to make them better. I'm thinking purely from a technology standpoint. I don't know, Kyle, what you think of that.
Yeah, I think like where we're seeing that right now is in the software side of things, right? You have so many different kinds of products and LLM providers that are just sourcing and charging customers from the main providers on like how many tokens you can burn and whatnot. Their training is going to be different. Their sources are going to be different. How they measure the performance is going to be different. But a lot of the providers, they've been sort of benchmarking, that was a term like last year, benchmarking the performance. And there's a data set that's actually called Humanity's Last Exam, which kind of shows like it's a specialized curated set of PhD level questions from various different fields to assess how well the LLMs are doing. And I think, what's it called, Dean? Murphy's Law, there's going to be in one sense a rate of diminishing return, right? To some of these models. I think what we're going to see is how can these models get smaller? Because right now, like if you go to Costco and you look for a Mac Mini, there's going to be a sign that says 2 per person because everyone's trying to run an LLM locally.
Yep.
But the models that are free right now, they're nowhere near performance compared to like the best models right now. And I think we're going to see a sort of optimization going on. Like, can we make these models lighter to do more complicated tasks?
Or more custom for specific
tasks. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, that is an interesting thing that I also end up telling people that once you, if you're pretty skeptical of AI, it's probably because you've also never paid for it because of how, just the like, even on me on a very consumer basis, $20, the difference you see pretty quick is pretty surprising.
Yeah. But like I have at work, we call Claude Uncle Claude to help us out with certain tasks. And so Uncle Claude would just propose like this giant 200-line script. And I'm like, it doesn't need to be this complicated. Stop making it more complicated than necessary. I gave you specific instructions already, right? Intent is a very difficult thing when it comes to LLMs.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Again, and one, just like what you're describing in a very professional way. Yes, there are still thorns and difficulty in work, even in these things, automating, and perfecting all work. So you guys both
still toil. It's still vanity. It's still I'm preaching Ecclesiastes right now.
Yeah.
Guess what?
Amen.
Vanity.
You both mentioned AGI, artificial general intelligence. I mean, when they first, and this is such inside baseball, I'm not going to explain it. When people first started putting open claw agents on Mac Minis, I mean, people started saying, "We just hit it. That's artificial general intelligence." Like, just right. This
and then
is
2 weeks later, it was like, well, actually, it
Obviously.
deleted everything.
it deleted everything. A lot of those bots in that little thing were people pretending
Right.
to be
Right. The
AI
bot social network actually was people.
Yeah.
Are we like? Is that still just pure sci-fi fantasy, or are we actually like? Is this something that is actually being talked about now?
Can it happen? Is
Yeah,
another
that's
way to ask.
another good question, right?
Is it a possible thing?
Well, and that's where a lot of the debate is right now. So you've got the big proponents, the Sam Altmans of the world, who are saying we were going to achieve, like 5 years ago, so we're going to achieve AGI in 5 years. And a lot of the predictions are that kind of time horizon, because there's this gut, to put it the best way possible, there's a gut feel that the field is progressing so quickly that we are going to get there. But that's where I would go back to like Penrose and some of the other skeptics. I just don't think we're going to get there because there's a fundamental limitation in what mathematics can emulate. And AGI, general intelligence, is supposed to emulate what human cognition can do.
Right.
And I don't see it. I think it's so limited. It's hamstrung and it will never get there. But I'm probably in the field. I'm probably in the minority. I don't know.
Okay.
But from a practical standpoint, Kyle, when you were talking about some of the applications, so few, there's something like 10% or something of companies that have started these projects to use agentic AI to automate things have actually brought them to production. It's incredibly low because it's so hard to do. And what people find is just what you were describing before, Matt, is you do something, or what you're finding, Michael, you do it and you can't let it do its own thing because it'll make mistakes. It doesn't fully understand. And you got to have a human in the loop to improve it, to perfect it, to overcome the stupid mistakes. I mean, AWS had this happen just a few months ago. A major failed, 13 hours downtime because some agentic AI, some agent completely replaced a code base that took down a system for 13 hours.
We're going to be fine,
okay.
everybody.
Never forget to add "make no mistakes" to your prompt, friends, because that's how you make sure Uncle Claude
Exactly.
doesn't make mistakes. Make no mistakes. What do you think, Kyle? What do you think about this AGI question that everyone?
Yeah, similar to Dean. I don't know if I'm in the minority of this space, but I'm not convinced, given like we work with these tools constantly. And I even, like for Clerk GPT, a good amount of that was produced by Uncle Claude, but that's because I knew what are the components I need to build a preliminary MVP. There is a lot of limitations. And like, I actually set up OpenClaw just to see what would happen on my Raspberry Pi and only have it minimal access. And there was so many, it only had access to my Google Calendar and even partial permissions. There's so many things we need to think through in the software and tech space about the security layers involved. That's still an open-ended question. I think just because we're moving quickly doesn't mean we're actually going towards a direction to AGI. Again, like there's just so many papers out there, but the software hasn't caught up to what is possible in some of those papers. There's tricks here and there about optimization of what we call transformer architectures. There's LLMs being like, oh my gosh, it beat this new record for this exam. But at the end of the day, like it's just, I think I feel like we want to be fooled. We want to convince ourselves that we're fooled. This is something that we talk about in the computer science space, the Turing test, right? If you had like a robot and you had a human, and you didn't see any physical appearance of them, how would you know which one they're talking to? Right? A person's talking to, right? Yep. I'm still not convinced. But this is my limited career so far.
I think that the fact that you both are in the minority probably, I would just suggest, probably has something to do with your non-materialist beliefs, your spiritual beliefs. Because if you are a pure hard materialist, I mean, right, that again, you should use these tools, and then you may not conclude this, but you are going to be more likely to accept this idea that there will be a further evolution of knowledge, that if consciousness is a series of inputs, though ours are biological, we can do that. There's a way to do that. And obviously, clearly, consciousness is the miracle that materialism has never explained, because there's a soul, because there is a God, right? And so it actually makes sense to me that both of you would kind of be in the minority. And just like with hard macro evolution, the solution has always been just add more time. And that's all that we do with AGI. Just add, right, the movie Her, which I saw in college, right? I think it's set in like current year that we're in now, right? Where there's basically AGI, agents with everyone and their own personal relationships. Weird movie, Joaquin Phoenix. So you probably shouldn't watch it. But as my caveat to it, but yeah, that always add more time is the solution to these things. But yes. Michael, do you have any other questions? I don't want to. They've given us they've been so generous.
No, this is awesome. We'll probably want to do it again. So
I love this
really
topic.
Appreciate you guys.
It's all going to change.
Yeah. Do you guys want to, is there anywhere that you'd want to point people to if they want to find you on online, or if they have more questions about
if
some
you
of the
want
stuff?
to be found?
And if you don't want to be found, that's also okay.
That's fine. Like my website, abbottanalytics.com, if you can contact me through that, especially on a professional level. Obviously on the personal level, especially through the Patreon group, everyone knows where to find me there. Yeah. So
yeah, I can be found on X or via LinkedIn.
LinkedIn's good for me too.
Great. I'll link to your guys' X accounts in the show notes. And if people want to follow you and find out there. But we are so appreciative for you guys coming on. We learned a lot about AI. Maybe get a Claude Max plan to set your family up with generational wealth. At least I know you can win a chili cook-off with it. But thank you, Dean. Thank you, Kyle. This was great. We'll catch everybody else next time.